Alrighty. So first of all, thank you to the DX user group for having us, the x.AI team, and as well as Mike and the DX team for helping us, and Rob setting this up. We're excited to take you through a number of models that we've been working on, and also give you a little bit of background and insight into our team and kind of the overall roadmap and progression that we've had over the last number of months with DX. So we'll jump right in. So for the agenda, really quickly, as I mentioned, we'll do some quick introductions just in terms of our team and what we do at HCL Software. And then we'll dive really into the meat of the discussion around the models we plan on developing, looking at the roadmap for this year and next year and the following year, and then discussing the use cases, designs, and demos that we're excited to show you on 4 key areas. So auto summarization, keyword extraction, sentiment analysis, and hopefully we'll also get to content recommendation as well. Feel free, to ask any questions as we go through the use cases, designs, and demos. We're going to try to leave 10 to 15 minutes at the end for Q&A, but we obviously want this to be interactive. So any questions that you have, or please stop us. We want to be as engaging as possible on this. So, all right. So real quickly, so about the x.AI team, what is x.AI? Who is x.AI? Why was this team formed? So we started about a year and a half ago as kind of a skeleton crew under Mark Edwards. And the goal was to develop a machine learning team and develop expertise that focused on basically developing out capabilities for the HCL software portfolio. So a decentralized team that was looking across the portfolio, seeing how we could define use cases, develop out competitive analysis for teams, and then help them identify high-value ML based capabilities, and then work with them to collaborate and develop and deliver those models. And so that kind of framework of working with teams allowed us to see, across the portfolio, see opportunities where models were being leveraged in different areas and be able to reuse those models and skills in those certain areas. And so we collaborate with teams who want to obviously work with us, who want to forward the ML vision. And DX, we went through this process with them of looking through use cases, with Mike and team, doing a competitive analysis, doing that use case prioritization, and then ultimately selection, which we'd like to share with you today. And as for the collaboration process, so you'll see a lot of this in our presentation today, but we always like to show, okay, what business problem are we solving? Why are we solving it? What does the scenario look like today? How do we plan on transforming that into the future? And then all of the things that come after that. Do we have the data? What's the security, compliance, privacy considerations? What performance and success criteria are we shooting for? And that gets us to kind of the MVP that we'll be sharing with you today. So one of the things I thought would be worth sharing is some of the trends that we saw in ML and DXPs as part of this journey. And you'll see as part of the roadmap, some of these items come into play. So the first being, content automation and creation. So I think we've seen from a lot of analysts and competitors, the focus on content creation, quality, and speed. So that meant, how do you deliver tools for authors in order for them to focus on the content creation and quality and to deliver more content more quickly? as one kind of the key area. The second one was intuitive search, right? So for the for both authors and end users, how do you make search more intuitive? How do you eliminate things around zero search results? How do you better index your content? And then ultimately, how do you display that information to authors and end users? And then finally, kind of personalization and optimization. So end user segmentation, for example, or behavioral intent segmentation based off of past behaviors. How do we group you into a certain category to better target, for example, content recommendations, the right content for the right people? So we focused on these two key personas as part of our focus for the MVP and the roadmap items to come after. So the DX authors, first and foremost, we'll talk about. So how do we improve content automation and creation for authors? And then for DX end users, how do we better connect our end users with relevant content? So in terms of the MVP, what we have here is kind of what we were planning on doing now, and what you see is labeled as the MVP, and then what we plan on doing next. And the way we prioritize that was, again, looking at the competitive information, looking at DX as a whole, and then trying to place these items on this value effort matrix. And so we started off with auto summarization, keyword extraction, and sentiment analysis for a couple reasons. Number one, it fit into that reducing mundane tasks area, providing tools for authors so they don't have to spend as much time on the kind of the side aspects of creating content and more focused on how do they just focus on creating content. And then the second point is also to improve the underlying metadata, right? So in a lot of cases, we'll talk about in these scenarios, summaries and keywords, authors may not choose to do those things. So that has an impact on search, that has an impact on indexing. And if we can get those done, then that allows us to introduce more complex authoring tools, things around content recommendation for authoring. So for an author, how do I show them content that's going to be relevant as they create more content? How can they leverage that in line with what they're doing in DX? And then finally, the more complex, larger scenarios around end user capabilities. And so end user segmentation, end user recommendation. And so that was the real thought process around what do we start with to prove value? And then what do we do next in expanding complexity and difficulty from an ML perspective? So for our proposed roadmap for DX and x.AI, what we plan on doing now, for first half FY23 is the ML content authoring. So auto summarization, keyword extraction, sentiment analysis, the models that will show you today, the designs that will take you through. And then what we're currently working on, but is not part of that date, is the recommendations for authoring. So you'll get a sneak peek into a demo for that, not necessarily the designs, but a demo for the ML recommendations for authoring. And then after working through those, we plan on for FY24 really focusing on user segmentation and content recommendation, and focusing on how do we generate segments based off of the 4 key marketing areas that marketers look at: demographics, geographics, psychographics, behavioral data, in order to group those individuals, and then content recommendation. Once you group those individuals, how do you potentially show them relevant content, or how do you potentially show an individual relevant content based off of their search history, for example? So I'll stop there and just see if there's any questions or comments before we start diving into the model aspects and the design aspects. Alrighty. So in terms of where we are for the overall development process, like I said, we'll be showing you the design requirements or the designs, and then we'll be taking you through the models and demos. So this is for that MVP where we're currently at that stage at, and where we would love to get your feedback on the designs and also the demos. And then ultimately down the road, we'd like to have additional sessions with the DX user group to talk about, items related to, for example, production and things like that. So those will be coming hopefully. Okay, so now getting into the actual models and starting with auto summarization, right? So the way this is structured, we'll go through the as is to be. I'll pass it off to Hansel to take us through the designs, and then we'll get into the demos from some of our development team. So from a summary perspective in Content Composer and DX, today when an author is creating a new piece of content, one of the challenges is they may work on this, really nice piece of content that they're planning on publishing. And once they've built that, then they have to then decide if they're going to create, a summary, for example, manually create a summary for the content they just created. And this kind of potentially poses a problem for that author or just for all of the content in that case, because you could potentially have pieces of content where there are not summaries. Maybe an author, for example, opted out. And like I mentioned, this has rolling effects on it. So things like search, if you don't have that underlying metadata from a summary or a keyword perspective. And if we can develop out the ability to for example, just click a button and generate a summary based off of what the author has written, we felt that would be a really powerful way to help provide tools to just focus on building out content. And then on top of it, it allows us to then, once we have that in place, focus on content recommendations for authoring, because all of that underlying metadata is there. And so it's able to be surfaced based off of summaries and keywords. So that's the 2B that we're shooting for, simply clicking a button that allows the author to generate a summary based off of what they've already written. So I'll pass it off to Hansel to take you through the designs, and then to discuss the models after there. So over to you, Hansel. And just let me know once you want me to go to the next page.
Am I audible? Maybe just checking.
Yes, you are. Yep.
Yeah, okay. So I'm Hans, from one of the UI UX designers, and I would like to present to you the design set what we have for auto summarization. And what we have on the screen is an author that would like to create a new content. And as you can see straight out of the bat, we have in the description, we have the generate and details. Generate, maybe for the next slide, I will explain further. And for the details, it is the list of auto summarization, because descriptions can be different, and that is listed inside of the details. Yep. And next slide, please. So as you can see, the user is able to click the generate button, and we have this UI. And one of the advantage of this one is that the user can focus on creating content. In this use case, we can fill in the name, select the location of the content item, and we have the elements as well. And the generation will happen after we have saved the content. And next slide, please. So in this use case, the user already filled out the fields required, and even the selecting of location. Thus, we have the save button enabled. So both in the alert notification, which is the orange one, and then the save button above. Next slide, please. Yep. And as you can see, once we have saved the content, in the description, we have the auto summarization for the description based on the content or the values placed in these fields. Yep. Next slide, please. Yep. And then we also have in mind that whatever maybe there is a use case that we have generated a description and then the user updates the description and he or she wanted to generate once more. We have this dialog box confirming that do you need to generate a new one because it will erase the previous description that the user has updated. And so far, I think that is all what we have for auto summarization designs.
Thanks, Hansel. Any questions or comments on the proposed designs?
Yeah, I guess it's, sorry, this is Mike. I was going to say it's worth note that, this isn't ultimately going to be the only place where we see the functionality bolted on. But, in the early phases, looking at, the most basic, use case from a UI perspective, we wanted to at least get the obvious areas to try and understand where do we need to, like, at what point in the process do we need to bolt on this kind of author assistance functionality. This is also, of course, one of the questions that we have generally for all of our users. Where else does it fit? Does this fit with your workflows that you go through and so on? Because each customer, of course, experiences the product a little differently. So we're open to any feedback.
Yeah, so what languages are supported on this one? I mean, this example is for English, but we also support all the other languages.
Yep.
So Hubert, maybe that's a good segue into some of the technical details that we can run through.
Yep.
So do you want to just field that question real quickly on the languages?
Oh, for the languages, we need to like train a model that's specific to that language. So currently we only have English, but with the pipeline already set up, it should be straightforward to just retrain a model with that specific language.
So that might be a good discussion point, or maybe those languages, or a list of the prioritized languages. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that's a discussion you and I might have on if we follow what DX has, or if we have a prioritized list in terms of making sure we hit that for all of the languages that are
That makes sense. Yeah, we need to map in to discuss with Mike and others.
Sure. Okay. So Hubert, I'll pass it on to you on over to the details on the auto summarization model and demo.
All right. Thank you, Jared. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. So in addition to the question, there are a lot of pre-trained models that are already trained with different languages. It just depends on the availability and yeah. So to start this text summarization or auto summarization is the auto generation of shorter version of an input article. So we have two methods of doing so. The first one is extractive, where we use an algorithm to extract the most important sentences and concatenate them into a shorter version. There will be no changes in the phrasing or words or terms. Whereas in abstractive, the model tries to capture the context and meaning of the input text and tries to generate a whole new shorter version of that text. Next slide, please. So for model architecture, we decided to use a transformer. So transformer is a sequence-to-sequence model that utilizes self-attention mechanism that allows it to focus on one word to infer a connection to other words in the sequence or the sentence. So it specializes in long-range dependencies within a sentence. So we have here an example diagram. So a transformer is normally composed of two components, encoder and decoder, and each of these components have their own self-attention layer. So the self-attention layer generates the self-attention weights or scores, which are then being attached to each tokens or words. So yeah, that's how it generates the outputs. Next slide, please. So here we have the training workflow or pipeline that we have implemented in Kubeflow. So each of the components here have their own responsibilities. So the first component we have is the pre-processing. This collects the data, the raw text, the input articles from our data set, and pre-process it like imputation and stuff like that. And for the next component, this is where the actual training happens. So after training or fine-tuning, it would then upload the model to a cloud storage for the inference service to access. So in our inference service, this is where the model is loaded. A prediction API is deployed, where then a client can access the model from by inputting a text, and then that would then generate a summary. So similarly, we have an explanation endpoint with the same input text, but it generates Shapley values and a visualization URL. Next slide, please. Right, so for the demo, let me just share my screen. Is my screen visible? Right. Okay.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So in this demo, I've prepared several examples. Let's start with the long article. So we just need to like copy paste the whole article here and generate. So here we have two versions of the same output. It depends on what use case we wanted to use the summarization with. So for the title, we want it to be a shorter piece than the description. So it depends on the parameters, like the minimum length of characters, maximum length of characters. So yeah, with those parameters, we can generate different outputs from the same generated output. Let's try other examples. So, at the same time, we can also change the summary from abstractive method to extractive. So that would then change the summary output or the description output because we changed the method from abstractive to extractive. So in addition to that, we also have a model explainability feature. So I have here an already generated example. So what this shows is the summary, the output of the model, and the input that we have inputted to the model. And attached with it are the attribution score, which in this case is the Shapley values. So what this tells us is each of these words are kind of feature, and this shows us how this negatively or positively affect the output of the model. hence providing us some kind of explainability on how this model came up with this output. Yeah, do you have any questions so far with the auto summarization? Okay, if there's none, Jared.
Yeah, thanks, Hubert.
I do have one question.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, Dennis here. How can you guarantee that what's generated in the description is, well, how do you say that? Solid English, solid, correct English, or correct any other language?
So the web app is directly connected with the API. So in real time, the model generates those outputs. They're not pre-generated beforehand, just for the sake of demonstration. So they have been generated real time.
Yeah, I understand, but it's not
Your
about
question was grammatically, correct?
grammatically. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for.
Oh, so with that, we always want to provide some kind of human level interface where a human can edit the auto-generated summary. So in my demo, you can actually edit the description. So if you find an error there, then you can just.
But in the end, that's still required.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So
maybe to add to that, so the abstractive summary is the one that is generating text, and that's where we would need human intervention. But in the extractive summary, if you noticed, it's basically looking at significant pieces of the text and kind of concatenating them. So they're more likely to be unchanged from the original. Right? So what we are looking at is when for bulk actions, we would want to recommend the extractive model where there isn't human involved when we are updating large bits of content. And for that, we would recommend using the extractive summary. And for the interactive piece where the user is actually currently building the content, I think abstractive also will be useful, and there's also an opportunity to kind of for them to edit, right? So yeah, that's
okay. Thank you.
And that might be one other piece that. So one of the things we did consider about both the auto summarization and keyword extraction was some type of batch process. We thought, well, if for a given DX deployment there were X number of articles that you wanted to determine if there was the underlying summaries or keywords in place, would that be of value? Is that something that a customer may want to do? Is instead of having this individually, that could be one option, obviously, that we showed through the designs, but how do you look at, from a batching process, all of the content that may be missing there and be able to go in and fill that in? Is that something that a scenario that would come up or would be useful?
Well, it would be useful when it's grammatically correct, I think.
Okay, yeah.
If you generate it and you do it in bulk and you have hundreds, thousands of items that you generate, then you should expect that it's grammatically correct. Otherwise, the author still needs to go through all those items and read it.
Right.
It still saves work, of course, but so.
Okay. Yeah, understood.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
The actual workflow attached to that thinking is going to be important for us to kind of wrap our heads around. you know, we obviously recognize or suspect that there's you know, use cases out there like this, like for instance, taking whole site areas or whole content libraries and you know, batching them into this AI or into these models to generate, you know, basically the metadata or missing metadata in most cases. So, yeah, it's going to be important for us to understand, you know, what's the best way to go about doing that and offer that kind of a batch process, so that, you know, because we do have, you know, scenarios out there in the real world where, you know, folks have not managed metadata effectively and therefore have negative consequences in their search and things of that nature. So we're wanting to help them, you know, those customers that have that situation remediate.
Well, for metadata, I really see an added value here. So for sure, yeah.
Yep.
Great. All right. I'm conscious of time here, so well, no, not at all. No, I appreciate the feedback. I just want to make sure we can get to the models to get everyone's feedback here. So moving on to the generating keywords in Content Composer. So it really follows similarly to the summaries in terms of what we're trying to accomplish and take out that manual step process and add to that underlying metadata, right? So the 2B scenario is very much similar in terms of how do we allow the author to simply click a button and generate keywords automatically and allow them to, you know, correct for example, number of keywords. So I'll hand it over to Hansel to take us through the designs real quickly.
Yep. So this isn't different than the previous user flow that we have for auto summarization. So we try to keep it consistent throughout the whole product. So it is similar approach from what we have in description generation. And what we have here on the right side in the properties panel, we have the keywords, and that is the generating keywords features. Again, generating details. Thus, we have consistency with features. Yeah, maybe next slide, please. Yep, and in this use case, maybe just to change the user flow, in this use case, the user key types in the name, select a location, fill out the elements here. And can we proceed to the next slide? Yep, and once the user clicks to generate, we have the generate pending, similar to auto summarization. And once we have clicked save, in the next slide, please. So from there, we have generated keywords based on the content values that we have. Although what you see right now is just 6 keywords, but along the way or in implementation or in practice, these can be a wide range of keywords. Yeah. And next slide, slide. And also in Content Composer, we want to catch or highlight these generations. So in this use case, as you can see in the background, the description and keywords has an empty value. That's we have this dialog box where we inform the user if he or she wanted to create or generate a description and keywords. So we have 2 options. Maybe the user doesn't want it, so skip and save, or the user wanted to be generated for both. Thus, we have to check description and keywords and click the generate. Yeah. And I guess that's all for the proposed design for this one.
Yep. Thanks, Hansel. And so we'll turn it over to Harsha to talk about the keyword extraction model and demo.
Yep. Thanks, Jared. Hello, everyone. I'll just take you through the use case for keyword extraction, the algorithm and the process. So the keyword extraction, as we mentioned, like it helps both the content creator and the end user for content creation and as well as content curation. So the kind of model that we have used is a BERT-based model that kind of uses key phrase count vectorizer. If I can draw your attention to the right side of the image, where whenever we feed the raw document, it kind of generates 2 levels of embedding. So one is the document level embedding, and another one is the lower level individual key level embedding. So based on these two embeddings, we'll generate a cosine similarity score, out of which we kind of extract top 10 or top 20 keywords out of the candidate keywords. So this is a simple process like generation of embedding to document level and also at the keyword level. So if I have to pick up some of the advantages of this package that we have used. So in order to extract grammatically correct keywords or key phrases, it uses parts of speech tagging. So whenever we kind of extract the key phrases, that should make complete sense. It should not be something absurd. So it uses parts of speech tags to make the key phrases grammatically correct and to be present in the document. And we need not specify any range for the key phrases. So it kind of generate by itself. And also, like somebody rightly mentioned before, we also have different language support based on, it is purely based on some configuration and the kind of training that we provide to our model. So these are some of the highlights of the model that we have used here. And let me just take you through the demo, sharing my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yep. So we have a couple of document here for the example. So we'll just take you through one by one. So this document, it's being currently extracted from one of the DX blogs. So we'll try to extract keywords from this particular blog. So we'll use the same applet here. So I'll just give it as an input. So these are all some of the configurations that settings that we have. Some of them are really optional. The end user need not keep all these things. So here we define the number of keywords to be extracted. And these are all some of the diversification related configurations. So we have kept it to the optimum level so that the quality and the kind of keywords that are extracted are perfect. So we'll just go ahead and try to generate the keywords. So if you see, we have a couple of keywords and also key phrases. It is being generated as per the adjacent cosine similarity score. Higher the score, better is the keyword. So based on its weightage. So we can see like different keywords that are being extracted from this particular piece of document. And there are like hardly any repetitions or any overlap of any other keywords that have been extracted. So just in case, if you want to see the quality of keywords, in case if we don't use diversification, it so we can see some of the keywords that are being repeated. So this is purely optional for the end user. So we just made it to improve the kind of quality of keywords that we are extracting here. So we get a good quality of keywords and key phrases. And also one more example I would like to take you through. So this is one of the meeting transcripts that we have extracted from a sample. So we'll just go ahead and we'll try to extract what are the highlights of the meeting actually. So if I give this particular input here, and we'll try to extract what are the key things that has been discussed in this particular meeting transcripts. So yeah, so you can see that it is mainly discussed regarding Java, some search functionalities, prototypes. They have some probably some timelines and everything. So that those are the things that has been discussed here. So if you want to see some other examples, like we have model explainability for one of the tools that we are using here for our deployment. So we can also give that particular example, and we can just see what kind of keywords that we get. So it tells about AI explainability, model explainability, machine learning models, and the kind of libraries that is being used in this particular piece of text we have here. So this is how our current model is working. And also I've already highlighted the couple of features that the model kind of offers in this use case. So any questions or any other queries?
Yeah, I got one.
Yep.
What's diversity doing? And can you show it?
Yeah. So if you see, like, in case if I disable this, it kind of try to eliminate any of the duplicate keywords or key phrases that are present. So in case if I disable this, so you can just see the quality. If you just observe this existing kind of keywords or key phrases, now I've disabled it. Now, and in case if I try to generate the keywords, you'll kind of see some of the, if you see there is explainability, explanation, there is again repeated. So just to eliminate this, we have just given a kind of configuration. Of course, these are by default set to optimum values. The end user need not change anything, but we're just given a configuration kind of thing so that they can explore.
But you set diversity to 0.5. What if you set it to 0? What happens?
It will, if you can just see, you will see the repetitions as I explained. Though you have enabled it, you can just.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Over to you, Jared.
Yeah, thanks, Harsha.
Thank you.
So I have a question. In the abstractive model, it kind of seemed like the model is actually using words that don't even come from the original text. Is that correct? And if so, where did these words come from?
Yeah, for the abstractive summarization or model, it completely relies on the previous data the model has been trained with. So for example, if your model has been pre-trained with Wikipedia articles and you try to adapt it to a laser-focused domain, it would still be able to use some of the words and context from those previous data that it has been trained with.
Yeah, so for example, we're using as part of the training, we're working on currently like HCL's own DX implementation data in order to make sure that, you know, we're getting as close to, you know, what would be in a given DX environment as part of that, and obviously a larger corpus beyond that as well.
Okay, great.
Okay. So moving on to sentiment analysis. So one of the other authoring tools that we thought would be a worthwhile function as part of DX is determining the overall tone and sentiment of content. You know, currently today, obviously, it's just the author's determination on tone or overall sentiment. But ideally, in the future, we'd like to have that one-click button functionality in order to generate an overall sentiment. And this might be an area where, you know, since we're, as the x.AI team, less familiar with content creation in DX, this might be an area, especially on the design side, to get some feedback in terms of value from an author's perspective around sentiment or how far this could be taken. And we can talk a little bit about that once we get through the designs, but I will hand it over to Hansel just in the interest of time to take you through the sentiment designs.
So yeah, once again, we are inside a content item creation page, and you can see here the subhead text field is highlighted or on focus. And in this use case, the user is currently typing. Woodburn Studio is the common concept. Next slide, please. Yep, and then along the way, maybe he or she have updated it to United Concept, and the processing will trigger once the user pauses or stops typing, in order for it not to like completely load or process in the background. So thus we have this behavior where the user stops. That's the time where the generating of sentiment process starts. Next slide, please. And once the sentiment is generated, we have a user interface here, or an indicator that the current sentence or text that what we have is positive. And these can be color coded, green for positive, we have neutral for gray, and then red for a negative sentiment score. And next slide, please. And this icon, by the way, is clickable. So if you click this one, you will able to see the sentiment that currently it's positive, and then the sentiment score or rating. And then we have here the legends, maybe just to inform the user that these are the things, or these icon refers to the negative, neutral, and positive. And that's all for me.
And so one area that might be, we thought about exploring, but we wanted to maybe get some additional feedback, is the sentiment analysis can go further to beyond this. So from some of the competitive analyses that we've seen, right, pointing out specific words tied to certain emotions, for example. So the author may know specifically within a large body of text where certain sentiments are coming from, for example, is some things that we've seen. But again, we wanted to keep it simple to start, but if there was a need to expand to, more targeted sentiments for a given body, obviously feedback we would want to take into consideration, so we're providing value to the author. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sudhanshu to talk about the sentiment analysis model and demo.
Thanks, Jared. And good morning and good evening to one and all. So the sentiment analysis is basically referred to as opinion mining in sometimes. And the sentiment analysis model that we have used uses a transformer-based model to identify the tone or the sentiment of the text. And the texts are generally classified into a category of 2 or 3, basically on the requirements. It can be positive, negative, neutral, or just positive or negative sentiment. And if I can show you the architecture of a transformer, so you can see on the screen that we have a transformer which takes an input and puts out an output. So as Hubert already explained the in-depth architecture of the transformer, so I'll just quickly explain the overview of what a transformer is. So the second diagram for the transformer architecture, we can see that it has like layers, it has encoders and decoders. So the one model of the transformer that we are basically focusing on is the BERT model, which comprises of encoder only model. And if you see on the right side of the screen, we have two kinds of models that were initially trained by the Google team for creation of the BERT. So a BERT base basically has 12 layers of the encoders stacked on top of each other, and then they are trained on a very huge corpus of data set to create a pre-trained model. So next slide, please. Yeah. So like I mentioned that the BERT model provides us a pre-trained model, and a big challenge in the NLP and the deep learning technique is the shortage of the training data. And the BERT transformer framework was specifically trained on a Wikipedia and Google book corpus dataset, which are very huge dataset to start with. Like the Wikipedia dataset comprises of 2.5 billion words, and the Google book corpus comprises of around like 800 million words. So you can imagine that the dataset that it has and the word embedding that it will have is pretty huge. And then Google has used its resources and the transformer architecture to create a state-of-the-art BERT model. And what it provides is the transformer. We can basically take the pre-trained model, and on top of it we tune the pre-trained model to our requirements with a relatively smaller data set according to the use case, and then retrain the BERT model to basically get the classifier a positive sentiment or negative sentiment as per the requirement. One of the examples of the predictions is the one we can see in the bottom, where if we read through it, it basically points to a positive sentiment corresponding to it. And I'll quickly share my screen to show some of the demos with others as well. Can you see my screen? Yeah.
We can see your screen.
Yeah, okay. So this is the DX playpen kind of UI that we have used. So if you can see here that we have given relatively one of the inputs from the HCL block, and if we click on the generate, it will take like fraction of the seconds to generate the sentiment associated with the word. And a few other sentiments we can try is, like, for example, if we took the blog of the HCL software, this basically is mentioning that HCL has grown pretty huge in the last 4 or 5 years. So basically it is corresponding to a positive sentiment as well. And if we click on the generate, it will basically mention that it has a positive sentiment. And for example, if we take another of the blogs with the DX team, we have this input, and if we put it to get the prediction for the same, it will mention that it has a positive sentiment. So most of the sentiments that our blog will have is would be positive per se. So for example, we have a news blog which is saying that the greenhouse effect, global warming is increasing, and we have greenhouse effects. And if we take for example this sentence and try to focus on something to get the sentiment out of it, it will basically say that it has a negative sentiment associated with it because it is basically saying that it is something harmful or not good for the environment. So likewise, we have other models, and currently we are only the bot models that we have trained is focusing on the English language, but we have the pipeline for the multilingual aspect as well, in which we can get input from different languages like Italian and Spanish, and it will still provide the sentiment for the same. If any questions.
And I think Daniele, I think we're right at time here. So I know we wanted to set a little time aside for questions. I know there were questions that were asked throughout. We do have one more demo we could probably move on if folks had time to discuss content recommendation for authoring. We may not go through the slides, but just give you a feel for that. Otherwise, we can, stop here if folks have to leave.
I mean, we have the webinar set for 1 hour and 15 minutes, so we can go over a bit.
Okay.
So no problem with that, and we can extend that a bit also. I would have a question if I can, because
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
After seeing all of these, I'm seeing ideas about content extraction and content, I mean, the positive, negative evaluation. What I see when I'm with users of DX and writing content pages, what I'd like to see happening at some point is having a system like this guide authors to write with the right style. So let me make an example. If I want to write a piece that's entertaining, I'd like the system, such a system, to suggest me a way to rephrase an article in a way that's entertaining. If I want to educate or instruct, I'd like to have a system like this tell me if the information I'm providing has too many assumptions in the style, so that it improves the quality of the information that that the author is writing. And also another thing that I mean, we are here to dream, so that I'd love to see would be to have such a system be able to check the content across the site for style consistency, so that regardless of the author, the way I communicate with my visitors is consistent, and you don't feel too much the difference between one author and the other. I'm thinking about a specific case I'm working with, where in a university, many different offices are creating their content, and the outcome is often different or depends on who is writing the information. So is that something that makes sense and applies to this kind of engine?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I think on the first point, for example, so that next step around the sentiment analysis would then be, I think, to your point, and what we've seen in some of the authoring tools from a competitive standpoint, is that next step of, okay, is this what emotion is tied to this article, right? So entertaining, for example, could be one, angry, funny, right? And being able to provide that kind of graph of emotions to an author, to be able to say, okay, here's the sections, or here's the parts that are entertaining, right? And that's what's contributing to that entertainment. And then to your other point, yes, I think Mike and I had actually discussed that, but we hadn't gotten into the details. But stylistically, creating consistency, I imagine, if you're, for example, like a medical organization, right? You're probably going to be wanting to take a serious tone and not have too many jokes or what have you as part of your articles, and making sure there's consistency across that, I think, makes a ton of sense. I think that's some feedback we can certainly take back from our side and figure out how can we potentially break down that problem in order to show consistency. And I think starting with how do you show specific emotions that are tied to content beyond what we're just showing, which is positive, negative, or neutral, I think is probably the first step as part of that. Yeah, so that's great feedback. I think that makes a lot of sense from a use case perspective.
Okay, thanks. I give everybody the right to turn on their camera and talk. So I think we are in the discussion part of the.
So we actually do have one more, if that's okay, Daniele. So this is the one. So we talked about the three models. If I'll just quickly share, we talked about the three models that we plan on delivering for first half, and then what the other one that we've been working on is content recommendation for authoring, which we can run through quickly. Maybe Manjunith, we can just quickly talk about this and then go through the demo and leave the last 5 or 10 minutes.
Drive the show.
Yeah, sure, Jared. Thanks.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. So generally, we have situations like no, we are writing a article or we are writing a paper, and then we have the title, and then we also have some top level information of that article or paper. And then what happens is, suppose we want to complete the article, we are looking for more information. So generally, to get this more information, either we have to go to Google, or we have to search somewhere, which either takes time, or we will stop that. So we want to solve this problem, and then we want to give some kind of solution here. So we are coming up with a machine learning based recommendation system for authors, and then which can help during this scenario. So the content recommendation in this case is content recommendation for authors is based on information retrieval and semantic search, where certain suppose author writes some information, based on that information some of the articles within the organization or maybe external to the organization will be recommended. And then the goal of this is is to ease the experience of the users and help him to complete the whatever he is writing, and also help him to kind of to make his articulation faster. So the left side we have the window from TX Woodburn Studio, where generally we write the title and then we write the body, and then after that in current scenario, when we write this, generally we have to look for, suppose we are looking for some inspiration or ideas, we have to either go for Google or somewhere else, and then we are going to change the scenario. So in the to be scenario, when we write the title and when we write the body, and when we press the button, there will be kind of recommendations on right hand side from within the organization and from external to the organization. Yeah, Jared, next slide or demo. Yeah, so this is the general workflow or the technology behind this recommendation. So mainly it has two parts. First part is embedding space. The second part is cosine similarity. So in the embedding space, while training, we will be embedding all the articles here. And then whenever somebody writes any content, that content will be again embedded, and then it will be compared with the embeddings which are already in the database. And then between those articles and whatever is written, a cosine similarity score is generated, and then all the articles will be given, or for all the articles a cosine similarity score is generated, and then recommendations will be sorted out based on cosine similarity score. So which you can see here in the right side, and then top 5 or top 10 recommendations will be given as given in the authoring window. Can I share my screen and show the demo? Yeah, let me show you how it works. Suppose I'm writing an article. I have a title, and then I have a body, and then as I was telling, I have already showed you how it works, and then this particular model we have trained on arXiv dataset, which had about 380,000 scientific articles. Other than that, we have also combined it with some of the articles from HCL domain. So in this case, we will be able to get recommendations for either scientific article or anything from HCL. So let me choose something from science to demonstrate first. So here article on reinforcement learning, and then there is a title, and then there is a body. So suppose I'm writing this and I want something, some recommendation. That means if I press a button, I'll be able to get similar articles here. So this is on reinforcement learning. So all these are on the reinforcement learning, which are sorted with respect to cosine similarity score, which is on the left side here. And then suppose I'm going to some other topic, I will take a totally new topic, that is diffusion model. So on the diffusion model, if I want something else, some recommendations. model gives it for me. Generally, currently it is giving top 10 recommendations, and then I want something in HCL domain. So this topic is HCL Domino, and there is a title on HCL Domino, and then there is a body on HCL Domino. So there are recommendations with respect to HCL Domino. So different articles. So this is how it will work. That's all from my side. Any questions or suggestions?
Thanks, Manjunith. So yeah, you can see here, I think, what the value would be of being able to provide authors inline recommendations based off of content that you have internally or even externally, for example.
Jared, this is John Roslowski. Quick question.
Sure.
So I've been using a product on a personal level called Grammarly, which is very similar to this. If I screw up a sentence, it offers suggestions on better meetings, and then it also does fine-tune sentiment, right? Am I writing for business and so on? How does this compare?
So with regards to specifically this model, so Grammarly is, as far as I understand, it's meant for how do you, for example, it'll help you with your writing in terms of conciseness. It will punctuation and things of that nature. I think I haven't seen it, to be honest with you, with regards to recommendations of content. So I think that would be one area where we would differ, where this, Grammarly may help you with sentence structure or conciseness or how to rewrite a sentence, but this is providing context or content in line in terms of based off of what you're writing. Let me tell you about some other articles that maybe you want to leverage, maybe that you want to take from, maybe you want to embed a video from that previous article. And so it allows them to not have to context switch out of that situation in that stance. So I think that's one difference, but I think you're also getting to, when we're talking about auto summarization and keyword auto summarization and probably sentiment, that's getting into the realm of Grammarly. So the auto summarization, we're not really, from our perspective, not doing anything about conciseness or punctuation or how to write a sentence, but ultimately, how do we generate a summary for you to be able to leverage, so you focus on the content more, and then sentiment, and I think from the feedback we heard, crafting that sentiment more into something that's more insightful, more analytical about what portions of there. So there is a slight amount of overlap, but I think Grammarly is more focused on how do I make you a better writer, and we're kind of focusing on how do we speed up content creation, and how do we automate some of those mundane tasks. So hopefully that
it does. Thank you, because and maybe I missed this point, but the content recommendations, obviously it's not something that Grammarly provided. It just fixes the existing sentence or paragraph that you're working on.
Right.
Now,
right.
And you may have mentioned this, and my apologies because I was having trouble connecting. And
oh, no problem.
Where does this product get some of these content recommendations from?
So right now, Manjunith, when he built this model, trained it on it was scientific journals, scientific articles. So that's, and then also on HCL information, so on HCL articles. So the idea, I think, for content recommendation is that for a given instance, right, because your content is your own for a given DX deployment, the idea would be is you would be able to, and what we would work towards is be able to train on the content within your own deployment, right? So it's soaking up in the same way that it soaked up all of the information around all of those scientific articles to provide this type of recommendation, or all of the articles on the HCL software site to provide those recommendations for your given deployment. So all of the articles that have ever been written trained on those. So then when an author starts typing in the title or body, then they can provide those recommendations based off of your specific content.
Sounds good. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Daniele, I know we're so I know we're right at time here. We packed in a lot here, so apologies. Hopefully we had a decent discussion. We're happy to stay on.
I would say anybody that wants to stay here for another 10 minutes is welcome to.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Not a problem. Me and Dennis have cameras on. Jared has his own turned on right now. So I think that Dennis, did you know all these keywords and language? It's not my average discussion. So
well, it looks really interesting. I see use cases for it, and I especially see some use cases where we can actually run it in a batch job, actually scanning the content of an entire site as to sentiment, maybe. So that's very interesting. The other thing I would like to see is content recommendation. Can we configure it, for instance, to our own site? So if an author is writing some new content for the site, can he actually see, maybe get some recommendation on what's already on the site?
This guy does.
Yeah. So that you can actually just bring your own site as to scan for recommendations.
What?
So
yeah, I think that's the intended use of content recommendation as well. That's what we're looking to do in the end. So this demo focused on some articles because we wanted to keep it generic, but the intention is to use content from a particular deployment.
Right. Interesting, really.
And all we have seen was machine learning applied to text models. Any request or idea about using machine learning, about analyzing the author's behavior, the content life cycle, because over time you get a pile of content that nobody reads anymore. Okay. And one thing I've been always looking for is content governance. Like, you created this content, it's your turn to check if it's still relevant or it's rotting away. So to add to the product that kind of boring stuff that helps keeping information up to date. And I always thought that this kind of mathematical based processes could help to figure out how often a content should be rechecked or a suggestion should be sent to the editor to take a look, or at some point, oh wait, one thing that comes to my mind, could you, using those models, to figure out if two pages are talking about the same thing and telling the user opposite information? I mean, that happens in reality. So I can imagine you're away from your microphone. We don't hear you.
I should have this on. There we go. Always
Okay.
switches over. I think also to your point, right? Knowing when, for example, like someone had last visited an article, if you have a number of articles that maybe someone's not, you have your population just not reading, to either revamp that, resubmit it, or figure out a way to, or maybe remove it, for example, and do that across the site, right?
And I have another one on this, because on a site we manage, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of news items. When should I take away the old ones so that search engine optimization is picking up my new content and not directing people to old content that they don't care they find? So that could be helping me pushing my best and more interesting content from my point of view by hiding stuff that is old. I don't know if this is something that makes sense to have in a machine learning model, but maybe the more you do, the less they do.
Yeah.
So why not?
I mean, even from, because we'll also look at just like because when we go through these problems, we'll also make that identification is ML necessary, but that doesn't take away from us working on the problem if there's a statistical model that may be sufficient, right, for solving that problem in that case. But yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
And we'll also look into that from maybe a competitive standpoint around content governance, because that's its own realm, I imagine, in terms of once you get up to the thousands, tens of thousands of articles, for example, how do you, how do you govern those articles? How do you make sure they stay fresh, things like that?
And I was thinking of a clustering on the content based on different signals on the content as well, Jared. So
that's
I think we could use clustering not just for the users and based on the behaviors, but also on the content itself and
right. So the idea being maybe the idea being you almost get a heat map of the types of you get a heat map of the types of content that your site has, right, and clustered in a sense.
Sorry, I missed this.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I think my connection jumped out. So to add on to Abu's point, maybe I think, so were you saying, Abu, almost like clustering based off of the type of content on a given site to see maybe what the focus areas for a given site is? Are you, so if you're a medical news organization, for example, and you run the cluster analysis on all of your articles, you end up finding, okay, you're focusing mostly on surgery, but you haven't really focused on preventative medicine, for example. And that gives you some directionality on potentially what content to generate next.
Yeah, I think we could find natural groupings of contents, like we would find natural segments of users, right? And then analyze those sets of contents, and that could mean different things. I think it goes into the analysis of what they mean, but yeah, I think that when Daniel, you brought it up, I was thinking on those.
Yeah, even depending upon the different behavioral of the content, or maybe the semantic information of the content also can grouping the data, and that individual group or in individual segment we can utilize for different like domain specific medical data or maybe the finance data, this kind of segmentation can also focus.
Question, since we're heading towards 5:30 already, when do we see this as a first demo in DX? CFO 8 will be, I think it's coming out next week, so CFO 9, 10?
Yeah, so I'll take that one.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see, this is Mike, by the way. Long story short, we're doing POC work right now, right? As you've seen, clearly we have working models, not saying they're finished, right? But we're building essentially the plumbing now, and you'll start to see it filtering in first to demos relative to those POC environments we've built. and continue to iterate on. You know, we're working as the x.AI team obviously is new, and we're working on essentially some of the infrastructure considerations at the moment. But you know, ultimately the goal is well, clearly it's showing up in our roadmap for you know, for the series release. So we'll probably start to see, you know, productization you know, in between now and then, right? So over the course of the next 6 months, we do have functional demonstrations that we can already provide. And we do have that bolted onto you know, the content authoring UI. We have more work to do to make those more, I guess, consumable and you know, improve the user experience. We also have work to do to decide what is the essentially the production plumbing going to look like for this. But if anybody is interested in kind of getting in early and seeing what we're doing relative to that UI and so on, that's the reason why we're here today. We wanted to make sure everybody knows we're working on this stuff. And those that are interested in kind of giving early feedback and early proof of concept, you know, maybe even playing with it at some point here soon, that you know, we have people that are willing to do that to help us out, and you know, make sure that we're headed in the right direction.
And I ask a question to Dennis and make a comment. I think that we today, as I say, have seen a lot of model technology that we will never be touching, but we want to be consuming. Okay, so we will not be AI people. I'm talking for myself. I have other stuff to do.
Same for me. Yeah.
But on the other side, and we learn a lot about what's behind. I am more interested in how we can consume those services. So at some point, what could be of interest for people like me is the architecture with which you are going to deliver those. How do I consume? I don't want it to have that power sealed in the UI you build. I want to be able to be creative about reusing those APIs. So I think we could offer you to visit us some months from now and to have a discussion on how those pieces get together so that they can serve the product, but also can open up for us the possibility to invent and embed and reuse. Because if we have ready to use plus the engine, I know a few people that can be really, really inventive about exploiting what you create. So that's an official offer. Join us again, and we get an update.
It goes two ways. It goes exactly what you say, Daniel. I fully agree on that. And on the other hand, I would like to see it embedded in the content composer because our editors want to work with it. So I don't want anything to do with that. Just have it available in the content composer, for instance.
Yeah.
So it goes both ways. So it's.
Or if I push content with API from the outside and they want auto keyword generation, or I want to throw at it a piece of text and get the keywords out. So, I mean, from my point of view, it's both an API that serves our custom development and an API that serves the product directly.
Yeah,
right.
We need both.
Yeah. And the intention, of course, is to get to a point where we're offering both and quite a bit more. It's obvious there is a number of locations throughout the UI that's in existence today and the UIs that we're considering for future, where this sort of author assistance is going to be a benefit. It's also quite obvious to me, at least, that there's a lot of the stuff that we're building for author assistance that is portable will benefit the rendered site as well. So for the, for the end users, whether that's, talking about recommendations or, even making some decisioning on how things are rendered or where they're rendered based on profile information, things of that nature. So all told, there's so many different areas that we could dive into, and we want to be measured and try and make sure that we're doing the right ones that's coming from, from the broader population of users that we have in the field, right? Not just because we can do it as engineers, let's go do it. Let's make sure we're fixing some pain points for our customers.
Okay, it's time to close the show, Dennis. To you, and then we get everybody to get home. It's Friday, Friday after all.
we need to prepare for the game tonight. So
you have to.
Huge game for the Netherlands tonight.
So, well.
Okay, let me close. I throw this at you, but so thank you everybody for joining. Thank to the x.AI team to be our guests and run the show, because we have seen stuff that works, real stuff, and that's always welcome. This was our last meeting this year, and we are trying, working, doing stuff to make it even more interactive next year. There is
to get more people involved, of course.
Yes,
we want.
And Rob is going to help. Rob has told me he's going to bring some interesting things, and we aim to have more customers, more real implementation shown on screen, what has been done, what can be done, because the more we are in the community, the more we learn that well hidden under a rock, there is a great solution that needs to be storytold to everybody. So that's what we are looking for.
And
yeah, Mike.
Just selfishly from HCL's perspective, anybody that has interest in diving deeper in this, please reach out. Feel free to reach out to me or anybody in the team. We're very, very hungry to start to combine what we're working on right now with real world use cases. I'm sure there are folks that want to see more and get into more detail what we're doing. So
yeah, absolutely. Like the additional kind of extension of those use cases on sentiment and batch processing and consistency, all of those were great, and we took those to heart and noted them on how we can advance those. So yeah, very much appreciated, and thanks so much for the time and having us take you through the content.
Thank you very much to everybody.
Yeah, thanks all.
Next year.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.